Good morning, Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say firstly what a great pleasure it is to be at somebody else's ocean event. I have been greatly honored to be part of this very timely and important meeting, the Global Ocean Action Summit, and particularly pleased to see such an extraordinary representation from across the globe. If only The Economist could match that, I'd be very happy. Also, of course, the extraordinary production values. I'm not sure The Economist can stretch to those. Let me say that I'm most grateful, too, to the organizers of this event, the Dutch government, the FAO, and the World Bank for the opportunity as Executive Director of the Economist World Ocean Summit to brief you about our event, to tell you where it's going, I hope, and to tell you what I believe it can achieve. The informal connections between this event and our own are quite deliberate and real. The World Bank's Global Partnership for the Ocean, it's gone a little bit quiet recently, but that was announced first at our own first World Ocean Summit in Singapore in February 2012. And since then, we have worked where we can to coordinate themes to better drive an ocean agenda to maximum benefit and impact. For those of you who managed to attend our February World Ocean Summit in San Francisco this year, the continuity in themes cascading from that event into this event, I hope, should be clear. And our next event, and I'm taking a leap of faith in saying that this will be in early 2016 here, our next event will aim to build on the discussions and the outcomes, I hope, at this event. But let me step back just briefly for a moment for those of you who were unable to join us in San Francisco and recall the questions that John Micklethwaite, the editor of The Economist, posed at the outset of that summit. Why are we doing this? Why does The Economist believe the oceans are so important? Three reasons he gave. First, it brings together so many of the subjects, of course, that we are fond of writing about: science, business, technology, economics, and of course, politics. This may seem obvious, but for us journalists, of course, this is a tremendous challenge. Second, at the heart of the troubled ocean, and we wrote about that in 2009 very clearly, is a huge, knotty and difficult problem, an economic riddle, if you will. We all despoil the seas, but none of us own it. And this is the sort of riddle I think that The Economist really thrives on, bringing the tools of economics to globally relevant and complex policy issues, often, I hope, in a disruptive way. Third, for 170 years, and that's how long we've been around, The Economist has been a paper with a cause. And with the oceans, there is indeed very much a cause and a chance for us to do something, I think. In what world does it make sense, John Micklethwaite noted at the event, that taxpayers spend tens of billions of dollars a year to subsidize the spoliation of our seas. So the purpose of our summit, therefore, is to use, I think, whatever influence we have as a global media organization to convene our audience, opinion and decision makers from across the world and from across a wide cross-section of businesses, government, international organizations, academia, and non-governmental organizations to convene that audience and catalyze, I hope, a robust and solutions-focused discussion around the sustainable use of our seas. Now, I have to say, since I began working on the seas about 4 years ago, and that started what The Economist was doing, my sense is that the oceans, should I say the ocean, has really become, as an issue, has really begun to come of age as a global policy issue. Not in the sense, I think, that it has caught up with land-based sustainability and conservation dialogues and approaches. It's still a long way from that. But I think in the sense that it, and no matter how fragile, in the sense that it has clawed its way onto the global policy agenda. I only wish in some ways that the Economist Summit could claim some level of responsibility for that, but of course I think we're just very much just a small part of a much broader confluence of action, of trends and forces, and among them, let me just cite, I think firstly the fruition of years of incremental achievements of ocean advocates from the top down, to some degree events like this, and particularly from the ground up. Two, I think the ever more stark and pressing messages of science about the degraded state of the oceans, particularly the impact of climate change on the one hand, and on the other, I think, our growing understanding of the importance of the oceans to life on Earth. I think thirdly, the quite recent realization, and this is represented in policy documents that we're hearing about in the first discussions, the first presentations this morning, that the ocean economy is potentially a driver of new growth, of blue growth in particular. And fourthly, I think the growing, as a result of that, the growing precautionary calls for responsible, sustainable development of our ocean, and with that, particularly for better governance. These two twin themes being the focus of our last World Ocean Summit. But a rising tide, of course, lifts all boats, and if you'll forgive the metaphor, and the World Ocean Summit that we run is very much part of that rising tide. But what is the summit actually contributing, and what is it achieving, and what discernible outcomes are there? Well, let me just briefly outline a few of the key deliberations and, I suppose, conclusions. Firstly, speakers and participants concurred, I think almost unanimously, that there is an urgent need, a really urgent need to improve governance if this increased economic activity I just spoke of in the ocean, and which we are witnessing right now, is to be managed effectively and the degradation of the oceans halted and reversed and its health restored. I think this is going to require enormous political will. We don't see that at the moment. And ambition, we don't see that either. It will require a collective response, and it will require, I think, the active participation and innovation of the private sector, from which much of that degradation often originates. Secondly, I think developing a sustainable ocean economy would not be simple or straightforward by any stretch of the imagination, and the task will not succeed without the right economic tools and policies and the right incentives. Indeed, I think participants repeatedly underscored the profound connection between the ocean and the economy and society at global and local levels. I think tied to that, the urgency too of bringing clarity and consistency to the valuation of ocean resources and ecosystems, and to the natural capital accounting which flows from that. This was widely agreed, I think, to be essential if businesses, if coastal communities, if governments and policymakers are to establish the kind of stable environment and level playing field needed to attract sustainable investment into the ocean. And to do so, sustainable, rather strong governance frameworks, including much stronger controls to address market failures and externalities, are going to be essential to support the new kinds of approaches and investments I've just spoken about. Continuing the government's theme, there was unanimity in the conference that integrated ocean management, which has been mentioned earlier, despite its complexities, and including, among which include those winning over, I think, those in the private sector who stand to have their own interests to some degree curtailed. That, as an approach, needs to be accelerated and fast-tracked where possible. If that's possible, it would provide an important process for working towards common goals and would help improve sustainable investment opportunities and efficiencies in the oceans. And we had a number of commitments at the event to try to at least get some of the resource constraints that integrated ocean management faced in front of finance ministers. And indeed, I understand that this event is going to take on, hopefully, some of those particular challenges. Of course, there were many other threads of discussion at the event. I can't go into them all. We looked at issues around abolishing fishing subsidies, around high seas governance. But I think if I was to suggest what the perceived value of the event was, let me try to do so. Firstly, I think the audience, the unique and diverse cross-section of the ocean community that I think The Economist is able to convene. I mentioned that diversity earlier. Secondly, I think bringing the private sector, which hitherto is not really at the table, bringing the private sector to the table, which is also importantly a focus of this event today. I think our view is that solutions to the ocean's ills, I think, will only be partially successful. They may even fail if without the full participation of the private sector. Their views must be heard. They must be challenged, indeed, and held to account for damaging the oceans as they have. But they must also be included, encouraged, and incentivized, because I think it's their innovations and their experiences and dynamism that will be critical to driving sustainability and change in the oceans. I think, thirdly, the opportunity, the extraordinary opportunity with such a diverse and influential audience to do what we call speed dating. There was, with so many meetings going on around the main plenum, big and small, the most enthusiastic feedback we got from everybody was, please do this again, because of the quality, the sheer quality of the networking. Most particularly making unexpected connections, particularly with business, but not just with business, and new associations and new connections, and seeding new ideas and initiatives. And of course, the last two I would mention, reinforcing the case for a rational view of the oceans, for science and economics to be at the heart of ocean analysis, and for disruptive economics, hopefully, and innovation to drive solutions, making the connection between the new ocean economy and sustainability, that connection being valuation of ocean resources and ecosystems, is going to be central, I think, to the future of sustainability. And lastly, I mentioned what a global media brand, I hope, can bring to raising the visibility of ocean issues around the world. We're now planning our Ocean Summit 2016. And we'll shortly be announcing the location and the timing. The theme, appropriately, is financing a sustainable ocean economy, and is, of course, closely connected to the discussions and deliberations going on here today and over the next few days. And as part of our informal commitment to linking these events up, we hope, and we are also planning to take some of the relevant outcomes here through to our next event, and possibly through to a series of smaller events that will I hope will drive some of the outcomes and drive some of the discussions at the next main event. I do hope you're able to join us in 2016, or at least at some of these smaller events, and help us, I think, provide further impetus to the ideas and actions developed in the next few days. And for that, thank you.